My own mother forced me to sit in the freezing rain at my sister's wedding because she said my dark skin would ruin the aesthetic of the pictures. She poured wine on my $4,000 silk dress and called me dirt in front of 300 guests. She had no idea that while she was humiliating me, my husband and I had just finished signing the paperwork to buy the very company the groom worked for. And we were about to fire him before he even cut the cake. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated your worth. My name is Sophia, and at 32 years old, I have learned that blood does not make you family. Standing outside the grand pavilion of the Atlanta Country Club, I shivered as the cold October rain soaked through my dress. It was a vintage raw silk piece in muted beige, understated, but incredibly expensive, the kind of quiet luxury that screams wealth to those who know but looks like rags to those who value flash over substance. And my family definitely valued flash. I stepped toward the entrance of the crystal tent where golden light spilled out onto the wet pavement. Inside, I could see the silhouette of the string quartet and waiters passing trays of champagne. I reached for the door handle, but a large hand blocked my path. It was a security guard, a tall white man whose name tag read Brad. He looked me up and down with a sneer that I had seen 1,000 times before. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The service entrance is around the back near the dumpsters. Kitchen staff does not come through the front door." I tightened my grip on my clutch. "I am not staff," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the humiliation burning in my chest. "I am the sister of the bride. My name is Sophia. Check your list." Brad let out a short, mocking laugh and looked at his clipboard without really reading it. "I do not see a Sophia here. Look, do not make a scene. We have very important people here today. Executives from Aura Tech and city officials. We cannot have people like you loitering. People like me." The phrase hung in the damp air. Before I could respond, the glass door opened, and my mother Linda stepped out. She looked impeccable in a silver gown that shimmered under the floodlights, her lighter skin glowing with expensive makeup. But as soon as her eyes landed on me, her expression shifted from elegance to pure disgust. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" she hissed, looking around nervously as if I were a stray dog that had wandered onto the property. "Mom, tell this guard who I am," I said, water dripping from my hair onto my face. "He thinks I am kitchen staff." My mother did not defend me. Instead, she sighed a sound of deep exhaustion. "Well, look at you, Sophia. You are soaking wet and that dress looks like a potato sack. You cannot blame him for making a mistake. You simply do not fit the image we are trying to project today." I stared at her, stunned. "It is my sister's wedding, Mom. I was invited." "Invited out of obligation?" she corrected me sharply. "Listen to me. Brent has his regional directors inside. His boss is flying in from New York. These are people who value a certain bright, polished look. Having you inside looming in the background with that dark gloominess of yours, it throws off the entire balance. You know how you disappear in photos. You make everything look heavy." There it was, the colorism that had defined my entire childhood. My sister Keisha had inherited our father's light skin and loose curls, while I had my grandmother's deep mahogany complexion and tight coils. To my mother, Keisha was a trophy, and I was a stain. "So, what do you want me to do?" I asked, feeling a coldness spreading through me that had nothing to do with the rain. "Leave. No, that would cause drama," she said, checking her reflection in the glass door. "You can stay, but you cannot be in the main tent during the reception. I have had a table set up for you on the terrace." "Table 45. I looked past her shoulder to the terrace. It was completely uncovered. The rain was coming down in sheets now. There was a single rusted iron table sitting alone in the mud, far away from the warmth and the music. "Mom, it is pouring rain," I said, my voice trembling. "It is just a drizzle." She waved her hand dismissively. "Besides, you are tough. You have always been the resilient one, haven't you? Keisha is delicate. She needs the spotlight. You are better suited for the background. Now go sit down before anyone important sees you arguing with security. It is embarrassing." She turned on her heel and went back inside, signaling the guard to keep me out. The heavy glass door swung shut, sealing the laughter and warmth away from me. I stood there for a moment, the water soaking through my silk dress, chilling me to the bone. Inside the tent, I saw a group of Keisha's friends point at me and laugh, their mouths moving in silent mockery behind the glass. I walked through the mud to table 45. The metal chair was freezing. As I sat there alone in the rain while my family celebrated a few yards away, I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't the heartbreak of a rejected daughter anymore. It was the cold, calculated rage of a businesswoman who realizes a deal has gone bad. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I looked down at the screen, shielding it from the rain. It was a text from my husband, Malik. My family thought he was a broke construction worker because he drove a truck and wore work boots. They didn't know he was the head of Obsidian Capital, the private equity firm that had just spent the last 48 hours aggressively buying up shares of Auratech, the company the groom worked for. The text was short. "I am pulling up to the gate. I see you sitting outside. Dry your eyes, Sophia. The rain is about to stop and I am bringing the real storm." I looked up at the gray sky, and for the first time that day I smiled. They wanted me to stay in the dark. Fine. I would show them exactly what happens when you disrespect the people who hold the power. To understand why I sat in that rain, without fighting back in that moment, you have to understand exactly how my family operates. 2 weeks before the wedding, Malik and I drove to my parents' house in South Fulton. We took Malik's truck, a faded blue Ford F-150 that looked like it had seen better days in the 90s. My father hated that truck. He called it an eyesore that lowered the property value of his driveway. What he did not know was that underneath the rusted hood, Malik had installed a custom engine worth more than my father's luxury sedan. That truck was a lot like my husband, rough around the edges to the naked eye, but hiding incredible power and value for those who actually took the time to look. As we pulled into the driveway, I felt that familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. The house was a sprawling brick colonial that my parents could barely afford to maintain. The lawn was manicured to perfection, but I knew the roof had a leak they were ignoring, because they had spent their repair savings on a new chandelier for the foyer. Appearances always came first. We walked inside and the air was thick with performative joy. My sister Keisha was sitting on the velvet sofa, her hand extended in the air, admiring a diamond ring that caught the light from the window. Sitting next to her was Brent. He was wearing a suit on a Saturday afternoon, which told me everything I needed to know about his need for validation. "Finally, you made it, my mother," Linda said, not looking up from her iPad where she was scrolling through floral arrangements. "We have been waiting for 20 minutes. "Hello to you too, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. Malik nodded at my father, Otis, who was pouring brandy into a crystal glass. My father barely acknowledged him, offering only a grunt before turning his beaming smile toward Brent. "So, Brent, tell us more about this merger," my father said, his voice dripping with admiration. Brent adjusted his silk tie, leaning back with the arrogance of a man who believes he owns the room. "It is going to be huge, Otis. Auratech is about to be acquired by a massive private equity firm. Once the deal goes through, my stock options are going to triple. We are talking about generational wealth here. I will be running the entire Southeast Division." I felt Malik stiffen beside me. He squeezed my hand gently. He knew exactly which private equity firm was buying Auratech because he was the one signing the checks. But he kept his face neutral, playing the role of the silent, simple husband my family expected him to be. "That is wonderful, Brent," my mother cooed. "Keisha, you are going to be a queen." Keisha giggled, waving her hand again to flash the ring. "I was born to be a queen, Mom. And this wedding has to match that energy. It has to be the event of the season." "That is actually why we called you over, Sophia," my father said, setting his drink down. The tone of his voice shifted. It was no longer warm and welcoming. It was the business tone he used when he needed something. We have been reviewing the budget for the wedding. He continued, sliding a piece of paper across the coffee table toward me. We want the best for Keisha. Imported orchids, a 5-course meal, the house band from the jazz club downtown. But Brent's assets are tied up in this merger until next month, and your mother and I are a little illiquid at the moment due to some investments. I picked up the paper. The numbers were staggering, and at the bottom, circled in red ink, was a figure. $15,000. What is this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. We are calling it the sister contribution, my mother said matter-of-factly. Since you are the oldest and you have that steady little logistics job, we thought it would be your gift to the couple, to help cover the venue deposit and the catering. $15,000 is not a gift, Mom. That is a down payment on a house, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Oh, stop being dramatic, Keisha chimed in, rolling her eyes. You and Malik don't have kids. You live in that small apartment. What else are you spending your money on? It is not like you have a high-maintenance lifestyle. I looked at Malik. We lived in a penthouse downtown, but we kept a small apartment address for family mail specifically to avoid this kind of entitlement. I can write a check, I said quietly. I wanted to help. I loved my sister despite everything. But if I am contributing this much, I assume this covers my expenses for the bachelorette trip and my bridesmaid dress. The room went silent. My mother exchanged a look with Keisha. My father suddenly found great interest in his brandy glass. Well, about that, Keisha started picking at her manicure. We were thinking you could help coordinate the day of the wedding, like making sure the vendors are on time, directing guests, handling the back-end stuff. You are so good at logistics. So I am not a bridesmaid, I asked, the hurt blooming in my chest. My mother sighed, the same exhausted sigh she would use at the wedding 2 weeks later. Sophia, be realistic. The bridesmaids are all Keisha's sorority sisters. They are all a certain height, a certain build. We are going for a very specific aesthetic, a lighter pastel palette. You would stand out. And not in the way we want for the photos. We want visual harmony. Visual harmony. It was a polite way of saying I was too dark, too plain, too different to stand next to my golden sister. They wanted my money, but they did not want my face. Malik stepped forward, his heavy boots thudding on the hardwood floor. His patience had run out. So let me get this straight, Malik said, his voice deep and rumbling like thunder. You want her to pay $15,000, basically funding a third of this party, but she is not good enough to stand at the altar. She is good enough to be your bank, but not your family. Brent laughed, a sharp, condescending sound. He stood up and walked over to Malik, patting him on the shoulder patronizingly. Easy there, big guy. We do not expect you to understand the nuances of high society events. This is about image, brand management, something you do not really have to worry about in your line of work. What do you do? Again, lay bricks? Fix toilets? I felt Malik's muscles coil. He could have ended Brent's career right there. He could have pulled out his phone, showed his bank balance, and bought this entire house before dinner was served. But he looked at me. He saw the pleading in my eyes. I was not ready to blow our cover yet. I needed to see just how far they would go. Malik took a deep breath, removing Brent's hand from his shoulder with a grip that made Brent wince slightly. I build things, Malik said simply. That is what I do. I build futures. Make sure you remember that, Brent. My father stood up, sensing the tension. Okay, that is enough. Sophia, we need the check by Monday. If you cannot support your sister on her big day, then I do not know what kind of daughter I raised. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. I pulled my checkbook out of my purse. I wrote the check for $15,000, not because I was weak, but because I wanted a receipt. I wanted tangible proof of exactly what I was worth to them. Here, I said, tearing the check out and placing it on the table. Visual harmony. I hope it is worth it. We walked out of the house in silence. Keisha squealed behind us, already planning how to spend my money. As we got into the truck, Malik started the engine, the powerful roar of the hidden motor vibrating through the seats. You know, Malik said, looking at the house through the rearview mirror. When we buy Auratech, I am going to make sure the restructuring is painful. I looked at him and nodded. Wait until the wedding, I whispered. Let them have their visual harmony for one more week. Then we show them what real power looks like. But as we drove away, leaving my parents smiling over my money while mocking my existence, I made a silent vow. I would never let them make me feel small again. The check I just wrote was the last penny they would ever get from me. The next time I opened my wallet, it would be to buy their consequences. 3 days after the dinner at my parents' house, I found myself standing in the corner of the Gilded Knot, the most exclusive bridal salon in downtown Atlanta. The air inside smelled of expensive vanilla candles and fresh peonies. My mother and Keisha were seated on a plush velvet podium in the center of the room, sipping champagne that a nervous assistant kept refilling. I, on the other hand, was standing near the dressing room door, holding Keisha's purse, my mother's coat, and 3 different pairs of shoes they had discarded. I looked less like a sister and more like a hired help, which was exactly how they preferred it. The sales associate, a sharp woman named Elena, with immaculate posture and a judgmental gaze, swept the curtain back. Keisha stepped out, and for a second the room went silent. She was wearing a Vera Wang custom gown, a cascading masterpiece of silk organza and hand-stitched lace. It was undeniable that she was breathtaking. Her light skin glowed against the ivory fabric, and the corset bodice snatched her waist perfectly. Keisha turned to the floor-to-ceiling mirror, admiring herself from every angle. She ran her hands down her hips and smiled a genuine smile that almost made me forget how cruel she could be. "This is it," Keisha whispered. "This is the dress. I look like royalty." My mother clasped her hands together, tears welling up in her eyes. "Oh, Keisha, you look absolutely perfect. Brent is going to faint when he sees you. This is the aesthetic we talked about. Pure, angelic high class." Then my mother's eyes flickered over to me in the mirror's reflection. I was wearing a simple black turtleneck and slacks, trying to blend into the wallpaper. "Sophia, come fix the train," my mother commanded, snapping her fingers. "It is bunched up at the bottom. Do not just stand there." I set the pile of coats and purses down on a chair and walked over. I knelt on the hardwood floor, carefully arranging the delicate layers of tulle around my sister's feet. From down there, looking up at them, the dynamic of our lives was painfully literal. Keisha on the pedestal, me on my knees serving her. "Be careful with your hands," Keisha snapped, looking down at me. "Your nails are dark. Do not snag the lace." "I am being careful," I said quietly, smoothing the fabric. I stood up and stepped back. Elena, the sales associate, clasped her hands. "It is truly a one-of-a-kind piece. It retails for $12,000, not including the veil or the alterations." $12,000. I saw my mother flinch slightly, but she recovered quickly, not wanting to lose face in front of the associate. "Quality costs money," my mother said with a tight smile, "and my daughter deserves the best. We will take it, and the veil, and those crystal shoes she tried on earlier." Keisha squealed and hugged our mother. "Thank you, Mom. This is going to be the wedding of the century." We moved to the front counter to settle the bill. The total came to $14,500 after taxes and the rush fee for alterations. The air in the shop was thick with anticipation. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out my father's platinum credit card. She handed it to Elena with a flourish, acting as if spending this amount was a daily occurrence for the Williams family. Elena took the card and swiped it. We waited. The machine beeped, a sharp, dissonant sound that cut through the soft jazz music playing in the background. Elena frowned and swiped it again. Another beep. "I am sorry, ma'am," Elena said, her voice dropping an octave to be discreet. "The card has been declined." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother let out a nervous laugh. "That is impossible. My husband must have forgotten to raise the daily spending limit." "Try it one more time." Elena tried again. "Declined. Do not honor." Keisha's smile vanished. Mom, what is going on? There are people watching. I looked around. Another bride and her mother were whispering near the accessories wall. My mother's face flushed a deep, embarrassed red. She started digging through her purse, pulling out another card, a standard visa. Try this one, she said, her hand trembling slightly. Elena ran it. Declined. Insufficient funds. The humiliation was palpable. My father had leveraged everything they had into risky investments and keeping up appearances. They were cash poor, living on credit that had finally run dry. Keisha looked like she was about to cry or scream, or both. This is ridiculous, Keisha hissed. Mom, fix this. I am not leaving without this dress. My mother turned to me. Her eyes were desperate pleading but hidden behind a layer of anger. Sophia. I looked at her. Yes. Handle this, she whispered harshly. You have that savings account from your little job. Pay for it. Your father will pay you back next week when his transfer's clear. We cannot leave here empty-handed. I looked at the total on the screen. $14,500. They had already taken $15,000 from me earlier in the week. Mom. That is a lot of money, I said. Do not embarrass us, Sophia, she hissed, grabbing my arm. Keisha needs this dress. Are you really going to be that selfish? After everything we have done for you? I looked at Keisha. She was not pleading. She was glaring at me, tapping her foot, expecting me to clean up the mess as always. Fine, I said. I opened my purse. I did not reach for my debit card. I reached into a hidden zipper pocket and pulled out a card I rarely used in front of them. It was made of black titanium, the American Express Centurion card, the black card. It was heavy, cool to the touch, and carried the weight of unlimited buying power. I handed it to Elena. Elena took the card. She froze. Her eyes went wide as she felt the weight of the metal. She looked at the card, then looked up at me with a completely different expression. The condescension was gone, replaced by shock and immediate deep respect. She knew exactly what it took to get an invitation for this card. Miss Williams, she stammered. I apologize. I did not realize. She inserted the chip. It approved instantly. No limits, no questions. As the receipt printed, Elena looked at me with awe. Thank you, ma'am. Would you like us to arrange private delivery for the gown? We offer white glove concierge service for our Centurion clients. Before I could answer, Keisha stepped in front of me, blocking Elena's view of me. She snatched the receipt from the counter. Oh, stop gushing! Keisha laughed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. That is actually my fiancé's card. He is an executive. He gave it to Sophia to hold because she is running errands for us today. She is just the assistant, basically. My mother let out a breath of relief and jumped on the lie immediately. Yes, exactly. Brent is very generous. Sophia is just handling the logistics. Elena looked confused. She looked at me, then at the card which clearly had my name. Sophia Williams etched into the metal. She opened her mouth to say something to point out the name on the card, but I caught her eye. I gave her a nearly imperceptible shake of my head. I did not need to prove myself to the sales clerk. I needed to execute my plan. It is fine, Elena, I said calmly, taking the card back and sliding it into my wallet. Just make sure the dress is ready on time. As we walked out of the store, Keisha and my mother were giddy, their humiliation forgotten the moment the transaction cleared. Did you see that sales lady's face? Keisha laughed. She thought you were somebody important for a second, Sophia. That was hilarious. Thanks for using Brent's money. I will be sure to thank him tonight. I walked behind them silent. I pulled out my phone and opened my secure banking app. I found the transaction for $14,500 pending at the Gilded Knot. I tapped on the transaction and opened the details menu. Under classification, I did not select gift or family expense. I selected short-term loan, high interest. Then I forwarded the transaction details to my personal accountant with a note attached. Document this as a loan to the bride. If not repaid within 30 days of the wedding date, initiate collection procedures against her and the groom's assets. I put my phone back in my pocket. Keisha thought she was wearing a $12,000 dress for free. She had no idea she was actually wearing a lien on her future. Make sure you do not wrinkle it, Keisha shouted back at me as I loaded the garment bag into the trunk of her car. I smiled at her reflection in the rear window. Do not worry, Keisha, I whispered to myself. I am taking very good care of my investment. Because unlike you, I expect a return on everything I spend. And this wedding was going to pay me back in ways you could not even imagine. The dinner to introduce our families took place at Le Jardin, a French restaurant where the menu had no prices and the waiters spoke with accents that I was fairly certain were fake. My mother Linda had been vibrating with anxiety all day. She had texted me 4 times reminding me to wear my hair up to cover my tattoos, and to speak only when spoken to. She was terrified of offending Brent's parents, the Hawthorns. The Hawthorns were old money. Not just wealthy, but the kind of wealthy that comes with a specific set of unspoken rules about who belongs and who does not. When we arrived, Richard and Nancy Hawthorne were already seated at the head of the private dining table. Richard looked like a senator from a movie, silver hair and a stiff jawline, while Nancy was draped in pastel cashmere, eyeing us over the rim of her spectacles. As we approached the table, the air grew instantly colder. My mother pushed Keisha forward, beaming like she was presenting a prize show dog. Richard, Nancy. This is our Keisha, my mother said, her voice rising an octave in that fake pleasantry she used for white people. Nancy smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She stood up and offered a limp hand to Keisha. Oh, you are very striking, dear. I must say, when Brent told us about you, we were expecting someone a bit more urban, but you are quite poised. I felt the back of my neck heat up. It was a classic backhanded compliment, a microaggression wrapped in a pearl necklace, but my mother just laughed, seemingly oblivious or choosing to ignore it. Thank you, Nancy, my mother said. We raised Keisha to fit into any circle. Then Nancy's eyes slid over to me. I was standing next to Malik, who was wearing a simple but well-tailored navy blazer. And who is this? Nancy asked, her nose wrinkling slightly as if she smelled something unpleasant. This is Sophia, my older sister, Keisha said quickly, sitting down next to Brent. And her husband Malik. Nancy did not stand up for us. She just nodded once. Oh, the sister. Brent mentioned you. He said you work in shipping logistics? I corrected, taking my seat. I own a supply chain management firm. Nancy blinked, looking confused, before turning away to speak to my father. Oh, how quaint. Richard owns a shipping fleet, you know. Actual ships. Very big business. The waiter poured wine, a vintage Bordeaux that cost more than my first car. The conversation for the next hour was a minefield of uncomfortable topics. Richard dominated the table, talking about the decline of traditional values and how hard it was to find good help these days. My father, Otis, nodded along like a bobblehead, agreeing with everything Richard said, desperate to be accepted into this circle. Then inevitably, the conversation turned to money. Specifically, Brent's money. Brent leaned back in his chair, swirling his wineglass. He looked around the table with a smug grin. Dad, I was telling Otis about the Aura Tech merger. It is entering the final stages this week. Once we sign the papers, the stock is going to skyrocket. We are talking about an 8-figure payout for the executive team. Richard nodded approvingly. Good work, son. That is the Hawthorne way. Capitalizing on the market. My mother clapped her hands together softly. That is amazing, Brent. You are going to take such good care of Keisha. Brent laughed, placing a heavy hand on Keisha's knee. Oh, she will never have to lift a finger again. Unlike some people, Keisha was made for leisure. His eyes flicked across the table to Malik. Malik was quietly cutting his steak, ignoring the bait. But Brent was not done. He needed to establish dominance. He needed to prove that even though Malik was physically larger and more intimidating, Brent held the social power. So Malik Brent set his voice loud enough to stop the other conversations at the table. I was thinking about you the other day. With this merger, we are going to be expanding our physical operations. We need more security at the new warehouse facility on the south side. The table went silent. My mother froze her fork halfway to her mouth. It is an entry-level position. Brent continued, taking a sip of wine. But it offers dental benefits. And since you are a big guy, you would be perfect for the night shift, keeping the riffraff out. I could put in a good word for you with the hiring manager. It pays $15 an hour. That is a step up from whatever odd jobs you are doing now, right? I dropped my fork. It clattered loudly against the china. I was about to stand up and scream to tell him that Malik could buy this restaurant and turn it into a parking lot. But Malik placed his hand on my thigh under the table. His grip was firm. He did not look angry. He looked amused. Malik wiped his mouth with his linen napkin and set it down gently. He looked up at Brent, his expression calm and unreadable. "That is a generous offer," Brent Malik said, his voice smooth and deep, carrying effortless authority. "But I have a question about the merger." Brent blinked, surprised that Malik was speaking. "What?" Malik leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "You mentioned the stock payout, but I was reading the prospectus for Auratech. Is it not true that the acquiring firm is purchasing the company via a leveraged buyout, specifically restructuring the debt-to-equity ratio at 4-to-1? Brent frowned. He looked confused. Well, the financials are complex." And Malik continued, not letting him interrupt. "If the acquiring firm is using a debt-heavy vehicle, wouldn't that trigger the change of control clause in your executive compensation package? Meaning your stock options would not vest immediately. They would actually be converted into restricted units with a 3-year cliff. So you would not see a dime of that 8-figure payout until 2027. Assuming you are not terminated for cause before then." The silence at the table was deafening. Richard Hawthorne looked at Malik for the first time with genuine interest, his eyes narrowing. My father looked lost. Brent stuttered, his face turning a blotchy red. That is not... Who told you that? You do not know what you are talking about. It is high-level finance. You stick to bricks and mortar. Okay?" Malik smiled. It was a wolfish smile. "Just curious, Brent. I would hate for you to count your chickens before they hatch, especially if the new owners decide to clean house." Richard cleared his throat loudly. "Well, let us not talk shop at the dinner table. It is rude." The subject was changed, but the energy had shifted. Brent spent the rest of the meal drinking heavily, glaring at Malik. He could not understand how a man in work boots knew more about his company's merger than he did. As we were leaving the restaurant, waiting for the valet to bring the cars, Nancy Hawthorne leaned in close to my mother. "Your older daughter," she whispered, looking at me with disdain. "She has a very aggressive energy. And her husband, he asks too many questions. You should really teach them their place before the wedding. We cannot have them upsetting Brent." My mother nodded frantically. "I am so sorry, Nancy. I will speak to them. It will not happen again." Malik and I walked to his truck parked far away in the back lot, because the valet had refused to park it up front, next to the Porsches and Mercedes. As we got in, I let out a breath I had been holding for 3 hours. "You destroyed him," I said, watching Brent stumble into his luxury sedan. Malik started the engine. "Not yet," he said softly. "I just poked him to see if he would bleed. And he did. He knows nothing about the deal, Sophia. He is just a figurehead." He put the truck in gear and looked at me. "By the way, the restructuring clause I mentioned, I added that to the contract this morning." I looked at him shocked. "You locked his money up for 3 years." "No," Malik laughed darkly. "I locked it up so that when I fire him on Saturday, he loses everything. The clause states that if an executive is terminated for conduct violating company values, all restricted stock units are forfeited." He reached over and took my hand. "He offered me a job as a security guard, Sophia. On Saturday, I am going to make sure he is the one begging for unemployment." As we drove away into the Atlanta night, leaving the toxic glow of my family behind, I realized something. The wedding was not just going to be a celebration for Keisha. It was going to be an execution, and Malik was the one holding the axe. The drive from the French restaurant to Midtown Atlanta was silent, but it was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of soldiers preparing for war. We did not drive to the modest two-bedroom apartment in the suburbs that my parents had visited once and sneered at. Instead, Malik steered the truck toward the Obsidian Tower, a 70-story glass needle that pierced the night skyline. This building was the headquarters of Obsidian Capital, and the entire 45th through 50th floors belonged to Nexus Logistics. We pulled into the private underground garage, bypassing the security checkpoint, where the guards simply nodded with deep respect as they recognized the truck. They did not see a beat-up Ford. They saw the vehicle of the man who signed their paychecks. We took the private elevator that required a retinal scan to access the penthouse offices. As the doors slid shut and we began the rapid ascent, the masks we had worn all night finally slipped away. Malik loosened his tie and rolled his neck, shedding the posture of the simple blue-collar husband. His eyes, which had been warm and passive at dinner, turned cold and calculating. When the elevator doors opened onto the top floor, we stepped into a different world. This was our kingdom. The walls were lined with digital art, the floors were Italian marble, and the view offered a 360-degree panorama of the city that we silently ruled. My assistant Marcus was waiting for me with a tablet in hand. He did not look at me like a disappointment or a charity case. He looked at me with the urgency of someone who knew my time cost thousands of dollars a minute, Mrs. Johnson, Marcus said, walking beside me as I strode toward my office. We have a situation with the shipment from Thailand. The orchids are stuck in customs at Hartsfield-Jackson. The client is panicking. They are threatening to sue the florist. I walked into my office, which was larger than my parents' entire ground floor. I sat behind my desk, a slab of black obsidian that matched Malik's company name. I pulled up the logistics dashboard on my 3 monitors. Nexus Logistics was not just a shipping company. We controlled the supply chains for 3 of the largest retailers in the country. If I paused operations for an hour, the East Coast economy would feel a tremor. Pull up the manifest. I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I looked at the screen. The client was the Gilded Knot, the bridal shop where I had just bought Keisha's dress. And the end user for the orchids was the Williams wedding, my sister's wedding. The irony was almost suffocating. Keisha had demanded imported orchids, claiming local flowers were too cheap for her aesthetic. Now those orchids were sitting in a crate 3,000 miles away, held up by a customs flag that only a level 5 clearance broker could remove. That broker was me. If I did nothing, the flowers would rot on the tarmac. Keisha would walk down an aisle lined with empty vases. It would be the perfect petty revenge. I hovered my finger over the deny button, but then I remembered the long game. I did not want to ruin the wedding with missing flowers. I wanted the wedding to be perfect, so that when we pulled the rug out from under them, the fall would be that much higher. Clear the shipment, I told Marcus. Override the customs hold using my federal credentials. Priority transport. Get them to the venue by Friday morning. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said, tapping his screen. Should I let the florist know that Nexus Logistics intervened personally? No, I said sharply. Make it anonymous. Mark it as a system-automated clearance. I do not want my name anywhere near that invoice. As far as my family knows, I just move boxes in a warehouse. Let them keep believing that lie for a few more days. While I was saving my sister's wedding from disaster, Malik was in the conference room next door, dismantling her fiancé's future. I walked to the glass wall separating our offices. Malik was standing at the head of a long mahogany table surrounded by 4 of his top analysts and 2 corporate lawyers. The screens behind him were flashing red and green with market data. He had Brent's company Aura Tech pulled up on the main display. I pressed the button to unmute the audio feed so I could hear him. I do not care about the ethics of it, Malik was saying, his voice low and dangerous. I want total control. What is the current float? One of the analysts spoke up. We have acquired 30% of the outstanding shares through shell companies, sir, but the board is resisting. They are trying to push through the merger with the original buyers to protect their bonuses. Malik laughed, a dry, humorless sound. The original buyers are leveraging debt. They are weak. I want you to go after the junk bonds. Buy the company's debt. All of it. Every distressed asset they have on the books. But sir, the lawyer interjected, that is a hostile move. If we buy the debt, we can force a recall. We could technically push them into insolvency if they do not agree to our terms. Exactly. Malik slammed his hand on the table. That is the point. I do not just want to buy Oratech, I want to own their soul. I want to be the one who decides who stays and who goes. Specifically, I want the power to terminate executive contracts without severance. He turned to the screen, zooming in on the organizational chart of Oratech. He highlighted the name Brent Hawthorne, Regional Sales Director. Get me 51% of the voting rights by Saturday at noon, Malik commanded. I want the ink to be dry before the groom kisses the bride. I want to walk into that reception not as a guest, but as the owner of the building, the company, and his paycheck. The room scrambled into action. Phones started ringing, keyboards clattered. Malik looked up and saw me standing behind the glass. He walked over and pressed his hand against the pane. I matched his gesture. From this height, the city lights looked like stars. Somewhere down there, Brent was probably bragging to his friends about how he had put us in our place at dinner. Somewhere down there, my mother was probably telling my father that I was an embarrassment who needed to be hidden away. They were asleep. We were awake. And while they dreamed of being royalty, we were the ones building the castle walls that would eventually trap them. I tapped my earpiece. Marcus, one more thing. Yes, Mrs. Johnson. Ensure the delivery trucks for the flowers are the old unbranded ones. I do not want the Nexus logo seen at the venue. We move in silence. Understood. I looked back at Malik. He gave me a nod. The trap was set. The flowers would be there. The stock would be bought. The stage was being prepared for the greatest performance of our lives. I turned off the lights in my office, leaving only the glow of the city. I was not the poor, dark-skinned sister who needed charity. I was the architect of their reality, and on Saturday, the ground was going to shift beneath their feet. 2 nights before the wedding, I found myself standing on the VIP balcony of the Vault, one of Atlanta's most exclusive nightclubs. I was not there to party. I was there to close a contract with the CEO of a major shipping conglomerate who happened to be in town for only 24 hours. While my family thought I was at home counting coupons or sleeping in my cramped apartment, I was actually wearing a $3,000 blazer and sipping sparkling water while negotiating a multi-million-dollar logistics merger. The bass from the speakers below was thumping against my chest, a rhythmic heartbeat that usually energized me. My client, Mr. Henderson, shook my hand and signed the digital tablet. It was done. Another win for Nexus Logistics. As Mr. Henderson left to catch his flight, I decided to stay for a moment to observe the crowd below. From the shadowed vantage point of the private owner's box, which I had access to thanks to a favor from the club owner, I had a perfect view of the chaotic dance floor. That was when I saw them. In a large booth right in the center of the VIP section was my sister, Keisha. She was surrounded by her bridesmaids, a sea of sequins and perfectly curled hair. They were drinking from a Magnum bottle of Grey Goose that I knew cost $600. A bottle that was likely charged to the credit card I had foolishly paid off at the dress shop. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the velvet railing. I should have left. I should have turned around and gone home to Malik. But something in Keisha's body language caught my eye. She was standing on the banquette, holding court, laughing loudly as she mimicked someone. She hunched her shoulders and made a face of pathetic desperation. I did not need to be a lip reader to know she was imitating me. Curiosity got the better of me. I signaled the security guard at the door of the box. He handed me a pair of noise-canceling headphones that were connected to the parabolic microphone system the club used for security purposes. It allowed management to listen in on potential altercations in the VIP booths. I pointed the mic toward table 12. The sound of the music faded into a dull thrum, and Keisha's voice cut through crystal clear. She just stood there looking so tragic, Keisha shouted over the music, her words slurring slightly. You should have seen her face when Mom told her she couldn't be a bridesmaid. She actually thought she had a chance. Like, hello, look in a mirror. You do not match the vibe. Her friends erupted in laughter. One of them, a girl named Jessica, who I had known since high school, leaned in. But isn't she paying for like half the wedding? Jessica asked. I heard she dropped 15 grand last week. Keisha waved her hand dismissively, nearly knocking over a glass. Oh, please, she owes us that, Keisha sneered. That girl has been riding my coattails her whole life. Mom and Dad took her in when nobody else wanted her. The least she can do is open her wallet. Honestly, she is just the help. I only invited her so I would have someone to clean up and handle the vendors. She is basically a glorified maid who pays for her own uniform. I felt a cold numbness spread through my fingers. A glorified maid. After everything I had done. After the late nights helping her with homework when we were kids. After the money. After the silence. To her, I was nothing more than a utility. A tool to be used and discarded. I was about to take off the headphones and leave, my heart finally hardening completely against the sister I had tried so hard to love. But then the curtain to their booth parted. My breath caught in my throat. It was Brent. This was supposed to be a bachelorette party, a girls' only night. But there he was, looking sweaty and disheveled, his tie undone. But he was not alone, and he was not looking for Keisha. Brent stumbled into the booth, but he did not go to his fiancée. He stayed near the edge where the shadows were deeper. A woman followed him in. She was tall, with platinum blonde hair, and a dress that was barely more than a shimmer of fabric. I recognized her immediately. It was Tiffany, the receptionist from his office at Aura Tech. The one he had jokingly complained was too incompetent to fire. I watched frozen as Keisha continued to dance on the table, completely oblivious to her fiancé standing 10 feet away. Brent leaned into Tiffany, speaking into her ear. He placed his hand on the small of her back. It was an intimate, possessive gesture. I zoomed the camera on my phone in. The lens quality was sharp enough to capture the beads of sweat on his forehead. Tiffany whispered something back and giggled, touching his chest. Then, in a move that made my stomach turn, Brent grabbed her waist and pulled her into the dark corner behind a large potted palm. It was semi-private, but from my angle on the balcony, I saw everything. He kissed her. It was not a drunk, accidental peck. It was hungry and familiar. He kissed her neck, then her mouth, his hands roaming over her body with an ease that suggested this was not the first time. I hit the record button on my screen. The timer ticked up. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds of my sister's fiancé cheating on her in broad daylight, or rather under the strobe lights, 2 days before the wedding. In the foreground of the video, Keisha was laughing, throwing her head back, toasting to her future. In the background, Brent was destroying it. I saved the video. I checked the quality. It was perfect. High-definition betrayal. I watched for another minute. Brent pulled away from Tiffany, wiped his mouth and smoothed his shirt. He handed her a stack of cash, and she slipped away, disappearing into the crowd. Then Brent stepped into the light of the booth, putting on a big fake smile as he approached Keisha. He hugged her from behind. Keisha spun around, screaming with delight, hugging him. She had no idea that 30 seconds ago, his lips were on another woman. I took off the headphones and handed them back to the security guard. Thank you, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I saw everything I needed to see. As I walked out of the club into the cool night air, I scrolled through the video one more time. I could have sent it to Keisha right then. I could have run down to the booth and caused a scene. I could have saved her from marrying a cheater. But then her words echoed in my mind. She is just the help. A glorified maid. If I saved her now, she would probably blame me. She would say I faked the video or that I was jealous. She would spin it to make herself the victim and me the villain. No, I needed to let this play out. I got into my car and sent the video file to a secure cloud server. Then I texted Malik. The acquisition is not the only thing we are closing on Saturday. I have the ammunition. Malik replied instantly. Hold fire until the reception. Let them sign the marriage license. Let him think he has won. Then we take it all. I drove home feeling a strange sense of calm. The hurt from Keisha's words was gone, replaced by the cold certainty of justice. They wanted a show. They wanted a perfect aesthetic. Well, I was going to give them a finale they would never forget. Brent thought he was marrying into a safety net. He had no idea he was walking straight into a wood chipper. And I was the one with the hand on the switch. The Friday afternoon before the wedding, I drove to my parents' house alone. The sky was overcast, threatening the storm that Malik had predicted, but the rain had not started yet. I found my father Otis in the backyard, standing by his prized smoker grill. He was holding a beer, staring at the manicured lawn with a look of deep satisfaction. To him, this wedding was not just a ceremony. It was the finish line of a race he had been running his whole life, trying to prove to the world that the Williams family belonged in the upper echelon. I walked across the grass, my heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. I had the video of Brent and Tiffany queued up on my phone. Despite everything Keisha had said to me, despite the way my mother had treated me, I still felt a flicker of loyalty. Keisha was my sister. I could not let her walk down the aisle blindfolded, marrying a man who was already stepping out on her. "Hey, Dad," I said, stopping a few feet away from him. Otis turned, his smile fading slightly when he saw it was me and not a delivery person or a wealthy neighbor. "Sophia," he grunted, taking a sip of his beer. "I thought you were running errands. Your mother said the flowers finally arrived. Good job on that." I ignored the backhanded compliment. "We need to talk, Dad. It is about Brent." My father stiffened. "What about him?" "If this is about the money for the dress, I told you I would pay you back when the market rebounds. Do not harass me about it. It is not about the money," I said. I stepped closer and held out my phone. "You need to watch this. I recorded it at the vault 2 nights ago." Otis looked at the phone with suspicion, but he took it. I pressed play. I watched his face as the video played. I watched his eyes track Brent's movements, the way he pulled the receptionist into the shadows, the undeniable intimacy of the kiss. I expected anger. I expected my father, a man who preached about honor and reputation, to throw the beer bottle against the fence. I expected him to storm inside and call off the wedding. Instead, the video ended and my father simply handed the phone back to me. His expression had not changed. "Well," he said, turning back to his grill. "What do you want me to do with that?" I blinked, confused. "Did you see it? That is Brent. He is cheating on Keisha with his secretary. We have to tell her. We have to stop this." Otis let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "Stop the wedding. Are you out of your mind? Do you know how much money we have invested in this? Do you know who is coming tomorrow, Dad? He is unfaithful," I argued, my voice rising. "He is going to break her heart." "He is a man." "Sophia," my father snapped, cutting me off. "And not just any man. He is a powerful, wealthy man who is about to become a multimillionaire. Men like that have appetites. It is part of the package. As long as he comes home to Keisha and pays the bills, what happens in a nightclub stays in a nightclub." I stared at him, repulsed. "You cannot be serious. You are condoning this." "I am being a realist," Otis said, poking the charcoal with a metal tong. "Keisha is not like you. She needs to be taken care of. She is not built for the grind. Brent is her winning lottery ticket. And quite frankly, he is the ticket for this entire family. If she marries him, our retirement is secured. Our status is secured." He turned to me, his eyes narrowing with a look of pure disdain. "And you know what I think this is really about? You are jealous." "Jealous," I whispered. "Yes, jealous," he spat. You cannot stand that your little sister landed a big fish while you are married to a guy who drives a beat-up truck and fixes things for a living. You want to sabotage her happiness because you are miserable in your mediocrity. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. He thought I was mediocre. He thought Malik was a failure. If only he knew that we could buy and sell Brent 10 times over. I am not jealous. Dad, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I am successful. I have built a life without any help from you. I paid for my own college. I worked 2 jobs while Keisha got everything handed to her. Otis laughed again, shaking his head. You paid for your own college? Is that the story you tell yourself to feel better? What do you mean? I asked, the air around me suddenly feeling very still. You really think you paid for 4 years of university and grad school on a waitress salary? Otis scoffed. Your grandmother, God rest her soul, left a trust fund when she died. $50,000. She wanted it to be split between the grandchildren. I froze. Grandma Dorothy died when I was 18. I never saw a dime of inheritance. You told me she died in debt, I said. Otis took a long swig of beer. I lied. I had to. Look, you were always the smart one. You were gritty. I knew you would figure it out. You could get scholarships, work, study, whatever. But Keisha needed help. She wanted to go to that modeling academy in New York. She needed a portfolio, headshots, wardrobe. That stuff is expensive. I felt the blood drain from my face. You took my money, I reallocated family resources, he corrected me, showing zero remorse. I used the entire $50,000 for Keisha's career launch. And look, it paid off. She met Brent. She is marrying a millionaire. It was a strategic investment. You survived, didn't you? You are fine. You are a logistics manager or whatever. You did not need the money like she did. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete, that I could not even cry. For over a decade I had carried the guilt of not being able to help my parents enough. I had felt inadequate because I had to struggle for every textbook, every meal, every credit hour, while Keisha lived in luxury. I thought they were just poor. But they weren't poor. They were thieves. My own father had stolen my inheritance to fund my sister's vanity. I looked at Otis. He did not look like my father anymore. He looked like a stranger. A small, greedy, pathetic stranger. You are right, Dad, I said, my voice ice cold. I did survive. And because I survived on my own, I owe you nothing. I turned to walk away. Where are you going? Otis called out, his voice tinged with annoyance. Your mother needs help setting up the patio chairs. I did not stop walking. I am going home to my husband. And Dad. Make sure you enjoy the wedding tomorrow. Eat the food, drink the wine, because after tomorrow, you are never going to see me again. Otis laughed behind me. Oh, stop being dramatic. You will be back. You always come back. You crave our approval too much. I got into my car and slammed the door. He was wrong. The part of me that craved his approval had died the moment he admitted to stealing my grandmother's legacy. I looked at the video of Brent on my phone one last time. I was not going to send it to Keisha. Not yet. My father wanted a show. He wanted to protect his investment. Fine. I would wait until the investment was fully matured. I would wait until the moment of maximum impact. I started the engine and drove away from the house that had never been a home. The sadness was gone. It was replaced by a clarity as sharp as a diamond. Tomorrow it was not just Brent who was going to pay. Everyone who sat at that table, everyone who benefited from my pain, was going to feel the weight of what they had done. I was done being the victim. It was time to be the executioner. I returned to our modest apartment complex that evening, feeling emotionally drained but spiritually resolved. The confrontation with my father had severed the final thread of guilt that had tethered me to my family for 32 years. I parked my sedan next to Malik's Ford truck in the dimly lit lot. It was late, and the air was thick with the humidity that precedes a heavy storm. The parking lot was empty, save for a few rusted vehicles belonging to our neighbors, most of whom worked night shifts just to make ends meet. As I stepped out of my car and locked the door, I heard the distinctive beep of a luxury vehicle unlocking. I froze. A sleek black Mercedes was parked in the shadows of the far wall, occupying two spaces. The driver door opened and Brent stepped out. He was not wearing the suit he had worn at the club. He was wearing a polo shirt and expensive loafers, but his face was twisted with a kind of manic aggression that I had never seen before. He had clearly been drinking, but he was not stumbling. He was focused. He was a man on a mission to silence a threat. "Well, look who it is," Brent said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "The little spy." I clutched my keys in my hand, positioning them between my fingers like a makeshift weapon. "What are you doing here, Brent?" "I am here to teach you some manners," he said, walking toward me with slow, deliberate steps. "Your father told me about your little presentation in the backyard. He told me you have a video on your phone." My father told him. Of course he did. Otis did not just dismiss my evidence, he handed me over to the wolf to protect his own interests. I took a step back, my back hitting the side of Malik's truck. "You should go home to my sister Brent. She is probably wondering where you are. Do not talk to me about Keisha," he spat, stopping just a few feet away from me. "You think you are so smart, don't you? You think you can blackmail me. Let me tell you something, Sophia. Nobody cares. I am the golden ticket. I am the future of this family. And you are just the jealous, ugly sister who wants to ruin everything because she is miserable." "Delete the video," he commanded, extending his hand. "Give me the phone." I stared at him, my heart pounding against my ribs, not from fear but from adrenaline. "No." Brent laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "You really think you have a choice? You are nothing. You have no power. You live in this dump with a husband who probably smells like grease and sweat." He turned his attention to Malik's truck. He looked at the faded blue paint and the dented bumper. "Look at this piece of junk," he sneered, kicking the tire. "This is your life, Sophia. Garbage. Just like you." He reached into the waistband of his pants and pulled out a heavy metal flashlight. He did not hit me. Instead, he swung the flashlight with all his strength at the front of Malik's truck. There was a sickening crunch of glass and plastic shattering. The headlight on the passenger side exploded. Shards of glass fell onto the asphalt. "That is a warning," Brent shouted, pointing the flashlight at me. "Delete the video, or the next time I swing this, it won't be at a truck." I opened my mouth to scream, but a voice cut through the darkness. It was a voice so low and vibrating with controlled violence that it made the hair on my arms stand up. "You have 3 seconds to drop that weapon." Brent spun around. Malik had stepped out from the stairwell. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and sweatpants, but he looked massive in the dim light. He did not look like a mechanic. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther stalking a gazelle. "Oh, look, the mechanic is awake," Brent jeered, though I saw his hand tremble slightly. "Go back inside, grease monkey. This is family business." Malik did not stop walking until he was standing directly in front of Brent. Malik was 4 inches taller and probably 50 pounds heavier of solid muscle. He looked down at the shattered headlight, then he looked at Brent. His face was completely devoid of emotion, which was far more terrifying than if he had been screaming. "You just made a very expensive mistake," Malik said softly. Brent laughed nervously, swinging the flashlight loosely by his side. "What is it worth?" $50. "Here, take 100. He reached for his wallet, but Malik caught his wrist. The movement was so fast I barely saw it. 1 second Brent was reaching for cash, the next Malik had his wrist in a grip that looked like it could crush bone. Brent dropped the flashlight. It clattered to the ground. Malik leaned in, close, his face inches from Brent's. "That was not a stock part," Malik whispered, his voice like gravel. "That was a custom housing with high-intensity discharge bulbs imported from Germany. The cooling system alone is titanium. You just caused $4,000 worth of damage to my property." Brent tried to pull his arm away, but he could not move. "You are lying," he stammered. "This truck is a piece of crap." Malik tightened his grip slightly, and Brent whimpered. Appearances can be deceiving, Malik said, just like you appear to be a successful executive, but in reality, you are a man standing on a trap door with a noose around his neck. Malik released him. Brent stumbled back, rubbing his wrist, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. He did not understand. He could not process that the man standing in front of him was speaking with the authority of a king, not a peasant. "Get out of here," Malik said, pointing to the exit. "And Brent, enjoy the next 48 hours. Wear your best suit to the wedding. I want you to look presentable when your world falls apart." Brent scrambled back to his Mercedes. He looked back once, trying to regain some of his bravado. "You are crazy!" he yelled from the safety of his car. "You are both crazy. I am going to have you evicted for threatening me." He slammed the door and peeled out of the parking lot, his tires screeching. I let out a breath and leaned against the truck, sliding down until I was sitting on the pavement. Malik knelt beside me. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew I was strong. Instead, he reached out and brushed a piece of glass from my shoulder. "He knows about the video," I said quietly. I figured, Malik replied, looking at the broken headlight. "It does not matter. The video is just the cherry on top. The real bomb is already planted." He stood up and offered me his hand. I took it and he pulled me up effortlessly. "I am sorry about the truck," I said, looking at the smashed front end. Malik smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Do not worry about the truck, Sophia. It served its purpose. It made him feel superior. It made him reckless." He put his arm around my waist and guided me toward the stairs. "Besides," Malik added as we walked into the building, "I already have the replacement part in the garage at the tower. And when we take over Oratech on Saturday, I am going to deduct the cost of the repair from his final severance check, with interest." We walked up the stairs, leaving the broken glass behind us. Brent thought he had intimidated us. He thought he had asserted his dominance. He had no idea that he had just poked a sleeping dragon. And as I listened to Malik's steady heartbeat, I knew that the man I married was not just a builder. He was a destroyer. And he was ready to burn everything down to protect me. The morning of the wedding dawned with a sky the color of bruised iron. While Keisha was likely sleeping in her silk eye mask at the hotel suite, I was already at the Atlanta Country Club, standing in the service entrance. My mother had sent me a schedule at 4 in the morning that listed my call time as 6:30, while the rest of the bridal party was not expected until 10. I was not there to get my hair and makeup done. I was there to oversee the load and acting as the unpaid site manager for an event I was barely welcome to attend. The air in the kitchen was thick with the smell of brewing coffee and panic. The head chef, a man named Pierre, who usually carried himself with military precision, was pacing back and forth, shouting into a cell phone in rapid-fire French. I checked my clipboard. The 3 refrigerated trucks carrying the 5-course meal consisting of Maine lobster Wagyu beef sliders and the truffle risotto were supposed to arrive 15 minutes ago. I walked over to Pierre. "What is the status?" I asked calmly. He slammed the phone down on the stainless steel counter. "Disaster. Complete disaster. The catering transport company just called. Their main truck blew an axle on I-85. It is blocking 2 lanes of traffic. The food is sitting in a hot metal box on the highway. If we do not get it into refrigeration in 40 minutes, the health department protocols require us to throw it all away." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. 300 guests. No food. This was not just a hiccup. This was a catastrophe. Just then the double doors swung open and my mother Linda stormed in. She was wearing a silk robe and her hair was in curlers, but her face was a mask of terror. She had clearly heard the news. "Tell me it is not true," she shrieked, ignoring Pierre and grabbing my arm. "Tell me the lobster is not rotting on the side of the highway." "It is true, Mom," I said, trying to unpeel her fingers from my bicep. "The truck broke down. Pierre is trying to find a backup, but on a Saturday morning in wedding season, nobody has a fleet available on this short notice." My mother looked around the kitchen, her eyes wild. She looked at the empty counters. She looked at the clock. Then she looked at me with a sudden, desperate realization. "You," she said, pointing a manicured finger in my face. You can fix this. Me? I asked. Yes, you. You work in shipping. You know people. You know, truck drivers. The way she said truck drivers dripped with classist disdain as if she were asking me to contact a criminal underworld. To her, my career was just dirty manual labor, but suddenly, that dirty labor was her only lifeline. Call one of your friends, she demanded. Call one of those guys you work with at the warehouse. Get a truck out there. Now. Mom. It does not work like that, I said, keeping my voice level. I cannot just conjure a refrigerated semi-truck. These are commercial logistics. Do not give me excuses, Sophia, she screamed, her voice cracking. This is your sister's day. Do you want her to be the laughingstock of Atlanta? Do you want Brent's boss to eat stale bread and butter? If you are good for anything, if you have any loyalty to this family, you will make a truck appear. Fix it. Or do not bother sitting at table 45. Do not bother sitting anywhere. She stormed out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and toxicity in her wake. Pierre looked at me with pity. I pulled out my phone. I walked into the walk-in freezer for privacy. My breath created clouds in the frigid air as I dialed Marcus. Mrs. Johnson. Marcus answered on the first ring. Is everything okay? No, I said. We have a logistics failure. Not ours. The caterer. I need a code red deployment. I need 3 refrigerated units, 30-footers dispatched to mile marker 42 on I-85. Transfer the cargo from the stalled vehicle and get it to the Atlanta Country Club. Understood? Marcus said, his typing audible in the background. I have a Nexus fleet returning from a drop in Savannah. I can reroute them. They are 15 minutes away from that location. Wait, I said. Marcus, listen to me. This is vital. The trucks cannot have the Nexus branding. My family cannot know it is me. Marcus paused. Mrs. Johnson, our entire fleet is branded. It is our mobile advertising. Then cover it, I commanded. Use the magnetic white panels we use for stealth government contracts. I do not care how you do it. Just make sure those trucks look like generic rentals. And tell the drivers to say they were dispatched by a third-party emergency service. Done, Marcus said. ETA to the venue is 35 minutes. I hung up and walked back into the kitchen. Pierre, get your team ready to unload. The food will be here in half an hour. Pierre looked at me like I had just performed a miracle. How, he whispered. I just smiled, a tight, humorless smile. Logistics. 30 minutes later, the service entrance rumbled with the sound of heavy diesel engines. 3 pristine white semi-trucks pulled into the loading dock with the precision of a synchronized swim team. The drivers wearing plain black uniforms jumped out and began transferring the crates of food with an efficiency that made the catering staff look like amateurs. The food was saved. The lobster was still cold. The Wagyu was safe. As the last crate was wheeled into the kitchen, my sister Keisha walked in. She was fully dressed now, looking radiant in her $12,000 gown, the one I had paid for. Brent was with her, looking smug in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my car. My mother was trailing behind them, looking relieved and triumphant. Oh, thank God, Keisha said, looking at the trays of hors d'oeuvres being prepped. I thought my life was over. Mom told me about the truck. She looked around the room. Her eyes skipped right over me and landed on Brent. Baby, you are amazing, Keisha cooed, wrapping her arms around his neck. Mom said you made some calls and got a corporate fleet to come save us. I knew you had connections, but this is next level. You literally saved the wedding. I stood there frozen. I looked at my mother. She knew. She knew exactly who had made the call. She knew it was Sophia, the daughter she was ashamed of, who had leveraged a billion-dollar infrastructure to save her golden child's party. But my mother said nothing. She just smiled at Brent and nodded. Yes, Brent really stepped up. That is the kind of power we need in this family, a man who can get things done. I looked at Brent. He looked surprised for a split second. He knew he had not made a single call. He had probably been drinking mimosas while I was coordinating a highway rescue. But he saw the adoration in Keisha's eyes. He saw the respect in my mother's face, and he decided to take it. He shrugged, adjusting his cufflinks. You know me, babe. I hate to see you stressed. I pulled a few strings with the distribution guys at Oratech. It was nothing. Just glad I could handle it for you. Nothing. He called my life's work, my empire, nothing. He stole my credit without blinking an eye. I stepped forward. Excuse me, I said. They all turned to look at me, annoyance flashing across their faces as if I had interrupted a private moment. Actually, I started, my voice trembling slightly. Actually, what Sophia Keisha snapped. Can you just move out of the way? The photographers are coming in here to get candid shots of us tasting the food. We do not need you in the background in your whatever that outfit is. My mother stepped in front of me, blocking me from the group. Sophia, go check table 45. Make sure the tablecloth isn't wet. Make yourself useful. We have this under control. I looked at them. The three of them standing there in their borrowed finery, celebrating a victory they did not earn, eating food they did not pay for, saved by a sister they did not respect. I looked at the Nexus drivers who were standing by the door waiting for a signature. One of them, a man named Davis, who had worked for me for 5 years, caught my eye. He looked like he wanted to say something. He wanted to say, "Hello, Mrs. Johnson." He wanted to blow my cover because he saw the disrespect. I gave Davis a sharp look and shook my head slightly. I swallowed the truth. I swallowed the rage. Okay, I said quietly. I will go check the table. I walked out of the kitchen, past the food I had delivered, past the family I had saved. As I walked into the rain, I heard Keisha's voice one last time. I am so lucky to marry a man who can fix anything. I stood in the drizzle and checked my watch. It was 11 o'clock. In 1 hour, Malik would own Oratech. In 1 hour, Brent's ability to fix anything would be exposed for the lie it was. Let them have this moment, I told myself. Let them eat the lobster. Let them praise the false hero, because the higher they climb on this pedestal of lies, the more satisfying it will be when I kick it out from under them. I walked to table 45 and sat down in the wet metal chair. I was ready. So there I was, back at table 45, alone in the rain, while the people who claimed to love me celebrated their deception inside a warm, dry tent. The drizzle had turned into a steady, unrelenting downpour that soaked through the layers of my beige silk dress, making the expensive fabric cling to my skin like a second freezing layer. My hair, which I had spent 2 hours pinning up in a style that was modest enough not to offend my mother's sensibilities, was now plastered against my neck. Water dripped from my nose and chin, landing on my hands, which were folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. I looked through the clear vinyl windows of the pavilion. It was like watching a movie of my own life where I had been written out of the script. Inside, the world was golden and glowing. The chandeliers cast a warm, flattering light on the guests who were laughing and mingling, oblivious to the woman shivering 10 yards away. I saw my mother Linda circulating the room with a glass of champagne in her hand. She was pointing at the centerpieces, those imported orchids that I had cleared through customs only 48 hours ago. She was probably telling the mayor's wife how difficult it was to source them, how she had moved heaven and earth to get them here. She took credit for my labor, just as she had taken credit for my tuition money so many years ago. I shifted in the rusted metal chair, and it made a screeching sound against the wet patio stones. A waiter inside glanced out at me, his face twisted in confusion. He hesitated, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres, wondering if he should come out and serve the exile at the bad table. I saw my mother catch his eye and give a subtle shake of her head. The waiter turned around and walked back toward the head table. Even the hired help was under orders to let me freeze. I watched Keisha and Brent standing near the cake. They looked like the perfect American couple. Brent was whispering something in her ear, and she threw her head back, laughing, that practiced laugh she used for social media videos. He was likely telling her how beautiful she looked, or how rich they were about to become. He was playing the role of the doting, successful husband perfectly. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award, especially considering I had video evidence of his tongue down another woman's throat just 2 nights prior. The anger I had felt in the parking lot with Malik, the rage that had burned so hot, it felt like it could melt steel, had cooled into something different. As I sat there wet and humiliated watching them eat the lobster I had delivered and drink the wine I had effectively paid for, I felt a strange detachment. It was the feeling of a demolition expert watching the timer count down on a building that is already rigged to explode. You do not feel angry at the building. You just wait for the dust to settle. I looked at my watch. It was 11:58 in the morning. According to the timeline Malik and I had established, the board meeting at Oratech would have concluded 5 minutes ago. The electronic transfer of shares would be processing through the clearinghouse right now. The legal notifications would be hitting the inboxes of the executive team at noon precisely. 2 minutes. I looked down at my hands. They were brown and strong. They were hands that had packed boxes, hands that had typed manifests at 3 in the morning, hands that had built a logistics empire from nothing. My family looked at these hands and saw dirt. They saw manual labor. They saw failure. They did not understand that dirt is where foundations are built. They did not understand that you have to get your hands dirty to build a kingdom that lasts. They lived in a house of glass and credit cards, terrified of a little rain, while I had built a fortress of stone and equity. My phone vibrated against my thigh. It was not a call. It was a single notification. I pulled it out, shielding the screen from the rain with my clutch. The message was from Malik. It was short. No emojis, no exclamation points, just business. The asset is secured, majority control established, the floor is yours. I stared at the words. The asset is secured. In that split second, the cold vanished. The shivering stopped. The rain that was pelting my face no longer felt like an insult. It felt like a baptism. It felt like the washing away of Sophia the scapegoat, Sophia the doormat, Sophia the invisible sister. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the damp, cold air. I looked at the tent again, but this time I did not see a party I was excluded from. I saw a boardroom. I saw a company meeting where I was the chairman of the board, and everyone inside was a subordinate waiting for their performance review. And Brent. Brent was an employee who had been stealing from the company. I stood up. The metal chair scraped loudly against the concrete, but I did not care who heard it. I smoothed down the front of my wet dress. It was ruined, stained with water and mud from the walk over, but it did not matter. I could buy 1,000 dresses. I could buy the factory that made the dresses. I reached up and pulled the pins out of my hair, letting the wet, heavy coils fall around my shoulders. I wiped the water from my eyes, not with the back of my hand like a crying child, but with my fingertips, like a woman adjusting her war paint. I picked up my clutch, which held my phone, my weapon. I started walking toward the tent. I did not walk with my head down. I did not walk quickly like someone trying to get out of the rain. I walked slowly, deliberately, each step splashing into the puddles, sending ripples through the reflection of the golden tent. As I approached the glass doors, the security guard Brad was still there. He saw me coming. He stepped forward, his face setting into that familiar look of annoyance. He prepared to tell me to go back to my seat, to tell me I was causing a disturbance. But as I got closer, he stopped. Maybe it was the look in my eyes. Maybe it was the way I was walking. Or maybe he just sensed a shift in the atmospheric pressure, a change in the energy that had nothing to do with the weather. I did not stop for him. I walked straight up to the glass doors. "Open it," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the sound of the rain like a knife. Brad blinked. "Miss, I told you the seating chart says—" "Open the door, Brad," I interrupted him. "Or I will have your employment contract terminated along with the grooms in exactly 5 minutes. He froze. He did not know how I could do that. He did not know who I really was, but he saw something in my face that terrified him. It was the absolute absence of fear. He stepped back and pulled the door open. The sound of the string quartet hit me first, a swell of violins playing Pachelbel's canon, then the smell of expensive perfume and truffle oil, then the warmth. I stepped onto the dry carpet. I was dripping wet, leaving a trail of muddy water on the pristine white floor. The conversation near the door died down instantly. People turned to look. They saw the bride's sister soaking wet hair wild standing in the entrance like a vengeful spirit that had risen from a swamp. My mother saw me from across the room. Her eyes went wide with horror. She dropped her conversation with the mayor's wife and started rushing toward me, her heels clicking frantically on the floor. She was waving her hands, trying to signal me to stop, to turn around, to disappear, but I did not look at her. My eyes locked onto the head table. Right in the center, under a massive floral arch of my orchids, stood Brent. He was raising a glass of champagne, proposing a toast to himself. To success, he was saying, his voice booming over the microphone. To family, and to knowing your place in the world. He stopped when he saw me. The room went silent. 300 pairs of eyes shifted from him to me. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had worn all day. I stood there dripping onto their expensive fantasy, letting the silence stretch out, letting the tension build until it was suffocating. Malik was somewhere in the parking lot approaching with his team, but I did not need him to start this. I took a step forward into the room. My mother reached me breathless and furious, grabbing my wet arm. "Sophia, what are you doing?" she hissed through her teeth. "You are ruining everything. Get back outside. You are wet. You are dirty." I looked at her hand on my arm. Then I looked at her face. "No, Mom," I said, my voice carrying through the silent room. "I am not ruining it. I am just here to give the groom his wedding present." I pulled my arm from her grip and walked past her straight toward the stage. The transformation was complete. The girl who sat in the rain was gone. The woman who walked toward the stage was the CEO of Nexus Logistics, the wife of Obsidian Capital, and the owner of everything they held dear. And she was about to foreclose on their reality. I stood there on the plush white carpet, a dark blemish on their pristine fantasy. The water from my dress was pooling around my feet, soaking into the expensive fibers. The string quartet had stopped playing, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush my ribs. I saw a waiter standing near a pillar, his eyes wide with secondhand embarrassment. I reached out my hand toward him, my voice steady despite the shivering cold that was racking my body. "Excuse me," I said. "Could I please have a towel? I just wanted to dry my face. I just wanted to wipe the rain from my eyes so I could see my sister clearly when I delivered the news that would end her fairy tale." But before the waiter could move, a flash of white lace and diamonds intercepted me. It was Keisha. She had seen me. And more importantly, she had seen the phone in the hand of her maid of honor, who was live streaming the entrance of the bridal party to thousands of followers. I was in the frame. The wet, disheveled sister in the ruined beige dress was ruining the aesthetic of her perfect moment. Keisha rushed toward me, moving faster than I had ever seen her move in her life. In her right hand, she held a large crystal goblet filled to the brim with dark red Cabernet. "You need to leave," she hissed. Her face contorted into a mask of panic and rage. "Get out of the shot, Sophia. Move." She did not wait for me to step back. She did not ask me to step aside. She lunged. It happened in slow motion. I saw her eyes lock onto my chest. I saw her wrist flick forward. It was not a stumble. It was not an accident caused by her heavy gown or her high heels. It was a calculated, aggressive body check designed to push me back out the door. Her shoulder hit mine hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me. And then came the cold. The wine splashed out of the goblet like a wave of blood. It hit my neck first, cold and shocking, then ran down the front of my silk dress, soaking instantly into the delicate fabric. The beige silk turned a deep, violent purple. It looked like a gunshot wound that was spreading across my entire torso. The sound of the glass hitting the floor and shattering echoed through the silent tent. For a second, nobody moved. I looked down at myself. The dress I had bought with my own money, the dress I had worn to show respect for an event I was barely invited to, was destroyed. The wine dripped from the hem, mixing with the muddy rainwater on the floor. Then Keisha screamed. It was a shriek of pure theatrical victimhood. She jumped back, checking her own pristine white gown for any stray drops. When she realized she was clean, she turned her fury on me. "Look what you did!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You did this on purpose. You clumsy, jealous witch." I stood there wiping wine from my chin. "Keisha," I said calmly, "you ran into me." "Liar," she yelled, cutting me off. Her voice rose to a hysterical pitch meant to garnish sympathy from the room. "Everyone saw you. You charged at me. You could not stand it, could you? You could not stand seeing me happy. You could not stand seeing me marry a rich man while you rot in your miserable little life. So you came in here to wreck my dress." She turned to the crowd, her eyes filled with crocodile tears. "She has always been like this. She has always been jealous of me because she is bitter. Because she knows she does not belong here." My mother Linda rushed forward not to help me but to comfort Keisha. She wrapped her arms around my sister, glaring at me with a hatred so pure it took my breath away. "How could you, Sophia?" my mother spat. "This is the most important day of her life, and you come in here looking like a drowned rat and attack her." I looked at my father, Otis. He was standing by the bar. He took a sip of his drink and looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. He was letting them rewrite the narrative right in front of him. Keisha pulled away from our mother and took a step toward me. She looked at the wine stain on my chest, and then she looked at my face. Her expression shifted from fake sadness to genuine cruelty. A sneer curled her lip, exposing the ugliness she usually kept hidden beneath layers of makeup and charm. "Look at you," she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that carried across the room. "You look disgusting. You look like you rolled in the mud outside. But that is fitting, is it not?" She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Because that is what you are, Sophia. You are dirt. You have always been dirt. You stain everything you touch. You darken every room you walk into. Why do you think we put you at table 45? We tried to hide the dirt in the backyard, but you just had to drag yourself inside and soil everything." The word hung in the air. Dirt. It was not just an insult. In the context of our family, in the context of the colorism I had endured for 32 years, it was a slur. She was calling me dirt because of my skin. She was calling me dirt because I worked with my hands. She was calling me dirt because she believed she was gold. The room was deadly silent. Even the waiters had stopped moving. 300 people watched, waiting to see if I would scream, if I would cry, if I would attack her. But I did not move. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of a judge who has heard all the evidence and is ready to deliver the verdict. She had just handed me the moral high ground on a silver platter. Then a laugh broke the silence. It was Brent. He was standing on the stage holding his microphone. He looked down at me with supreme arrogance, amused by my humiliation. "Well said, babe." He chuckled into the mic, his voice booming through the speakers. "That is exactly what she is. Trash." He gestured to the security team standing at the perimeter. "Security!" he called out, snapping his fingers. "Get this garbage out of here. She is disturbing the peace. And send her the bill for the carpet cleaning. I do not want to see her face again." 2 large guards started walking toward me. They looked hesitant. They looked at the wine dripping from my dress and the calm expression on my face, and they slowed down. But Brent was their boss, or so they thought. "Toss her out," Brent commanded. "And if she resists, drag her." Keisha smirked at me, crossing her arms over her chest. "Go on, Sophia. Go back to the mud where you belong. Maybe if you scrub hard enough, you will finally be clean." But I doubt it. Once dirt, always dirt. I looked at Keisha. I looked at my mother, who was nodding in agreement. I looked at Brent, who was laughing with his groomsmen. They thought this was the end. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me publicly and irrevocably. I reached into my wet clutch. My fingers brushed against my phone. I saw the screen light up. A message from Malik. "I am at the door." I looked at the security guards, who were now only a few feet away. I raised my hand, palm out, stopping them in their tracks. I am leaving, I said, my voice clear and strong, ringing out without a microphone. I turned my back on Keisha. I turned my back on the parents who had failed me. I walked toward the main entrance, the wine and water leaving a trail behind me. But I am not leaving alone, I whispered to myself. I reached the double doors just as they burst open. The gust of wind and rain that blew in was violent, making the candles flicker. But it was not just the weather. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the storm, stood a figure. He was flanked by 4 men in dark suits holding briefcases. He stepped into the light, and the air in the room seemed to adhere to his presence. It was Malik. But it was not the Malik they knew. It was not the mechanic in the dirty work clothes. He was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. On his wrist, a platinum watch glinted under the chandelier lights. His face was set in a line of cold, hard fury. He looked at me. He saw the wet hair. He saw the purple wine stain covering my chest. He saw the way I was shivering. His eyes darkened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He did not say a word to me. He did not need to. He stepped aside and wrapped his suit jacket around my shoulders. It was warm and smelled of sandalwood and power. Then he turned to face the room. He looked at the security guards who scrambled out of his way, terrified by the aura of authority radiating from him. He looked past the stunned guests. He looked past my mother, who had turned pale. His eyes locked onto Brent, standing on the stage. Malik walked forward. His footsteps were heavy and deliberate, echoing like a death knell. He did not stop until he was standing in the center of the room. He looked at Keisha. "You called my wife dirt," he said, his voice low but traveling to every corner of the tent. Keisha stammered, stepping back. Who are you?" Malik ignored her. He looked up at Brent. "And you ordered your security to drag her out." Brent gripped the microphone, his knuckles white. I did. She is trespassing. Who do you think you are, coming in here like this?" Malik smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "I am the man who just bought the building you are standing in," Malik said. "I am the man who just bought the company that pays your salary. And I am the man who is about to turn your life into dust." He held out his hand. One of the lawyers placed a thick stack of documents into it. Malik threw the documents onto the floor. They landed with a heavy thud right in the puddle of wine and rainwater. "Pick it up," Brent Malik commanded. "Pick it up and read the first page. Because that dirt you were talking about just became your landlord, your boss, and your worst nightmare." The security guards were less than a foot away from me. I could smell the stale coffee on the breath of the one closest to my left. He reached out his hand, hovering over my shoulder, ready to forcefully remove me from a room that I had paid to decorate. I braced myself. I would not scream. I would not fight. I would walk out with my head high, leaving them to their hollow victory. Brent was still on the stage, a smug grin plastered across his face, enjoying the spectacle of his sister-in-law being discarded like trash. Keisha was watching with a look of vindictive triumph, believing she had finally exorcised the one person who threatened her spotlight. But before the guard's hand could make contact with my wine-stained dress, a sound tore through the atmosphere. It was not the thunder from the storm outside. It was something deeper, something mechanical and guttural, that vibrated through the floorboards of the pavilion. It sounded like a beast waking up. The guard froze, his hand suspended in midair. He looked toward the glass doors. The guests turned their heads, confusion replacing their amusement. The sound grew louder, a low-frequency rumble that rattled the crystal glasses on the tables. It was the sound of raw, unbridled horsepower. Through the rain, slicked glass headlights cut through the gloom. Not just one pair, 2, then 4, then 10. A convoy of 5 massive vehicles tore across the manicured lawn of the country club. They were not respecting the paved driveway. They were driving directly over the fairway, churning up the wet grass and mud, heading straight for the glass pavilion. These were not the rented limousines that Brent had hired. These were matte black Cadillac Escalades, the extended editions with tinted windows that were darker than midnight. They moved in a perfect predatory formation like a military unit executing a precision strike. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. "Oh my God, they are ruining the grass!" "Who is that?" The lead vehicle drifted sideways, its tires tearing into the soft turf just inches from the glass entrance, spraying mud onto the patio. The other four vehicles fanned out behind it, forming a wall of black steel that blocked the view of the outside world. The engines cut simultaneously, plunging the area into a sudden, ringing silence. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The scene looked like something out of an action movie or a government raid. Then the driver's door of the lead Escalade opened. A man stepped out holding a large black umbrella. He did not look like a driver. He moved with the efficiency of a highly trained bodyguard. He walked around to the rear passenger door and pulled it open. A polished black leather shoe stepped onto the muddy grass. The man who emerged was not the man my family thought they knew. They knew Malik as the quiet guy in the flannel shirts and steel toe boots who fixed their leaking sinks and drove a rusted truck. They knew him as the man they mocked for working with his hands. But the man standing in the rain was a king. He was wearing a suit that I recognized immediately. It was a Tom Ford Windsor three-piece cut from charcoal wool that absorbed the light. It fit him with a terrifying perfection, accentuating the breadth of his shoulders and the power in his frame. He adjusted his cuffs, and the light from the pavilion caught the face of his watch. It was not a Timex. It was a Richard Mille, a complex skeletonized machine of titanium and sapphire that cost more than this entire country club. Malik did not look at the rain. He did not seem to feel it. He stared straight at the glass doors, his expression unreadable, his eyes focused with a laser intensity that made the air around him seem to crackle. Behind him, the doors of the other SUVs opened. 4 men and 2 women stepped out. They were dressed in sharp gray suits, carrying leather briefcases. They did not look like wedding guests. They looked like sharks who smelled blood in the water. They flanked Malik, falling into step behind him as he began to walk toward the entrance. The security guard, the one who had been about to grab me, stumbled back. He looked from me to the approaching phalanx of power, and his survival instinct kicked in. He realized he was standing between a hammer and an anvil. "Brad, open the door," I whispered. He did not need to be told twice. He scrambled to pull the glass doors open, bowing his head, as if he were afraid to make eye contact with the force of nature that was approaching. Malik stepped across the threshold. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the rhythmic click of his expensive shoes on the hard floor before he reached the carpet. He brought the smell of ozone and rain in with him, mixing with the scent of his cologne, a rich blend of sandalwood and authority. He did not look at the guests. He did not look at the decorations. He walked through the crowd as if they were ghosts. People scrambled out of his way. My aunt, who had spent years making snide comments about Malik's income, pressed herself against a pillar, her mouth hanging open, as she took in the suit, the watch, and the sheer, undeniable power he radiated. He walked straight to me. I was shivering, my dress clinging to me, the wine stain drying into a sticky, humiliating mess. I felt small. I felt dirty, just like Keisha had said. But Malik stopped in front of me, and his eyes softened. For a second, the king was gone and my husband was back. He looked at the wine on my dress and a muscle in his jaw jumped. It was a micro-expression of rage that vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a protective tenderness. He did not say a word. He shrugged off his suit jacket. It was heavy and warm. He draped it over my shoulders, pulling the lapels together in the front, to cover the stain, to cover the cold, to cover the shame my family had tried to heap upon me. He smoothed the fabric over my arms, his hands lingering for a second to squeeze my shoulders, grounding me. "You are safe," he whispered so low that only I could hear. Then he turned. He pivoted slowly to face the room. He was now standing between me and my family, a human shield made of wealth and fury. His eyes locked onto my father, Otis. My father was standing near the head table holding a glass of scotch that was shaking violently in his hand. He looked at Malik, trying to reconcile the image of his son-in-law with the titan standing before him. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to bluster, perhaps to ask what was going on, but the words died in his throat. Malik took 2 steps toward him. The lawyers behind Malik fanned out, opening their briefcases, retrieving documents, preparing for the slaughter. Otis, Malik said. He did not call him Dad. He did not call him Mr. Williams. He used his first name with a familiarity that stripped away all parental authority. Malik's voice was not loud. He did not shout like Keisha or posture like Brent. His voice was calm, deep, and resonant. It was the voice of a man who does not need to raise his voice to be obeyed. I sat in your backyard 2 days ago. Malik continued, his gaze pinning my father to the spot. I listened to you talk about legacy. I listened to you talk about protecting this family's reputation. I listened to you justify stealing your daughter's inheritance to fund a lie. A gasp went through the room. My mother's hands flew to her mouth. And today, Malik said, gesturing to me without looking back, I watched you stand there and drink your scotch while your daughter was humiliated. I watched you let security guards manhandle her. I watched you let your other daughter call her dirt. Malik paused. He unbuttoned his cuffs, rolling them up slightly, as if preparing for work. You failed, Otis. You failed as a father. You failed as a protector. You traded your integrity for a wedding that you could not even afford. My father's face turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. Now hold on, Malik, you do not understand. I understand perfectly, Malik cut him off. You made a choice. You chose the shiny object over the real diamond. You chose the fraud over the blood. Malik took one more step, invading my father's personal space. Since you are incapable of protecting your daughter, Otis, I am relieving you of that duty, permanently. From this moment forward, Sophia does not belong to this family. She belongs to herself. And she belongs to me. And unlike you, I protect my assets. I protect my own. He looked up, scanning the room, making eye contact with every person who had laughed, every person who had sneered. And God help anyone who disrespects my wife again. He turned his gaze to the stage where Brent was frozen, the microphone still in his hand, his face pale and sweating. Now, Malik said, reaching out his hand. One of the lawyers, a sharp woman named Jessica, placed a blue folder into his palm. Let us talk about protection. And let us talk about ownership. Because while you were busy playing dress-up in this tent, I was busy buying the ground beneath your feet. Malik held up the folder. Did you know, Otis, that this country club has been facing bankruptcy for 6 months? It was a quiet listing, very discreet. I bought the debt this morning. I bought the land. I bought the clubhouse. I even bought the grass. I just drove my cars over. He dropped the folder onto the table next to my father. It landed with a heavy slap. Technically, Malik said, a cold smile touching his lips. You are all trespassing. But I am a generous man. I will let you finish your cake, right after I finish my business with the groom. He turned his back on my father, dismissing him, as if he were nothing more than a piece of furniture. He looked at me, gave me a small nod, and then started walking toward the stage. The lawyers followed. The king had arrived, the court was in session, and the sentencing was about to begin. The silence that followed Malik's declaration was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. He stood at the base of the stage, looking up at Brent, with the calm demeanor of an executioner who has already sharpened the blade. Brent, however, was not ready to concede. He was standing on his pedestal, literally and figuratively, surrounded by his groomsmen and bolstered by the delusion of his own importance. He gripped the microphone tighter, his knuckles turning white, and let out a scoff that was meant to be dismissive but sounded desperate. You are lying, Brent announced, his voice booming through the speakers, but wavering slightly at the edges. You expect us to believe that you, a man who drives a rusted truck and fixes drywall for a living, just bought the country club. You are insane. Security, I gave you an order. Remove these trespassers immediately, or I will have you all fired for incompetence. The security guards looked at Brent. Then they looked at Malik and the wall of lawyers standing behind him. They looked at the black SUVs parked on the lawn. They did not move. They knew the smell of real power, and it was not coming from the man in the rented tuxedo. Malik did not shout. He simply raised his hand and snapped his fingers. One of his assistants, a young man with a tablet standing near the sound booth, tapped his screen. Suddenly, the massive LED screen behind the stage, which had been playing a loop of engagement photos of Keisha and Brent, flickered. The image of them kissing in Paris vanished. The screen went black for a heartbeat, plunging the stage into darkness. Then it illuminated again with a blinding white light. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Replacing the romantic slideshow was a stark, aggressive corporate logo, a black mountain peak against a white background. Underneath it, in bold, razor-sharp letters, were the words Obsidian Capital, and below that, a subheader that read, Majority Shareholder of Aura Tech. Brent spun around to look at the screen. His mouth fell open. He looked back at Malik, his eyes wide with confusion and rising panic. "What did you do to my slideshow?" Brent stammered. "Turn it off. This is a wedding." Malik walked up the stairs. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step echoing on the wooden stage. He walked right up to Brent and reached for the microphone. Brent tried to pull it away, but Malik's hand clamped over his wrist with that same crushing strength he had used in the parking lot. Brent winced and let go. Malik brought the microphone to his lips. "I did not just change your slideshow, Brent." Malik said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly amplified. "I changed your reality. While you were getting your hair gelled this morning, my team was finalizing the acquisition of Aura Tech's distressed debt. As of 12 o'clock today, Obsidian Capital owns 51% of the voting stock. Which means I am not just a guest you tried to kick out. I am the chairman of the board." "No!" Brent shouted, stepping back, but his voice was thin without the microphone. "That is impossible. The deal was with a private equity firm in New York. I know the partners." Malik smiled. It was a cold, wolfish smile. "We used shell companies," Malik explained. "We bought the debt through subsidiaries so you would not see us coming. We wanted to see exactly how you operated when you thought nobody was watching, and we saw enough." Just then, a sound cut through the tension. It was a ringtone. Not just any ringtone, but the specific urgent chime that Brent had assigned to his boss, the CEO of Aura Tech, Mr. Sterling. Brent reached into his pocket. He looked at the screen. He looked at Malik. "Answer it," Malik commanded, holding the microphone out toward the phone. "Put it on speaker. Let everyone hear the good news." Brent's hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the device. He swiped the screen and pressed the speaker button, holding the phone up with trembling fingers. "Mr. Sterling," Brent said, his voice cracking. "Listen, there is a crazy man here claiming he bought the company. Tell him he is lying. Tell him security is on the way." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a long, heavy pause. "Brent." The voice of Mr. Sterling came through, tinny but clear. "It is not a lie. The transfer went through 10 minutes ago. They bought everything, Brent. The patents, the inventory, the real estate. They even bought the executive liability insurance. I am packing up my office right now. The new board has requested my resignation." Brent's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the DJ booth to steady himself. But my stock," Brent whispered. "My payout. The 8 figures you promised." "I am sorry, son," Mr. Sterling said, sounding defeated. "The new owners invoked the conduct clause. They are restructuring. It is out of my hands. Good luck, Brent." The line went dead. The silence in the tent was absolute. 300 guests stared at the stage in shock. My mother had collapsed into a chair, fanning herself frantically. Keisha was standing frozen near the cake, her face a mask of horror, not because her husband was in trouble, but because she realized the money was gone. Malik turned to Brent. He did not look at him with pity. He looked at him with the cold efficiency of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. Malik raised the microphone again. "Now let us discuss your future," Malik said, addressing the room as if it were a shareholder meeting. "As the new owner of Aura Tech, I have a very strict zero-tolerance policy regarding discrimination and harassment." He pointed a finger at me. I was still standing by the door, wrapped in his jacket, my hair wet, my dress stained. "You insulted my wife," Malik said, his voice vibrating with anger. "You called her dirt in front of 300 witnesses. You judged her by the color of her skin and the content of her bank account. You thought because she was quiet, she was weak. You thought because I was silent, I was poor." Malik stepped closer to Brent, invading his personal space, forcing him to shrink back. "You represent everything that is wrong with corporate leadership," Malik continued. "You are arrogant, entitled, and cruel. And you are a liability to my brand." Malik paused, letting the anticipation build. "Brent Hawthorne, pursuant to Article 4 of your employment contract, which I rewrote this morning, you are hereby terminated for cause, effective immediately." "No." Brent gasped, tears springing to his eyes. "You cannot do this. It is my wedding day." "I just did," Malik replied. "You are fired. You lose your salary. You lose your unvested stock options. You lose your company car. And you lose your health insurance." Malik signaled to one of the lawyers, who stepped forward and placed a document on the DJ table. "And one more thing," Malik added, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "regarding the incident in the parking lot 2 nights ago." Brent's eyes went wide. He shook his head pleadingly. "Please, no. You vandalized my vehicle," Malik said, speaking into the microphone so everyone could hear. "You caused $4,000 in damage to a vintage truck because you thought you were above the law. You thought you could bully a working man." Malik smiled. "My legal team has just filed a civil suit against you for destruction of property and emotional distress. And since you are now unemployed and likely facing a massive debt from this wedding you cannot afford, I suggest you find a very cheap lawyer." Malik turned to the security guards. The same guards Brent had ordered to throw me out. "Security?" Malik commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. "Escort this trespasser off my property. He is no longer an employee and he is certainly not a guest. Get him out of my sight." The guards did not hesitate. They rushed the stage, grabbing Brent by the arms. "Wait, Keisha! Wait! Help me!" Brent screamed as they dragged him down the stairs. Keisha did not move. She looked at her husband being hauled away like a common criminal. Then she looked at Malik, standing center stage, radiating power and wealth. Then she looked at me. Malik walked down the stairs. He walked straight to me, ignoring the stunned guests. He stopped in front of me and gently wiped a drop of wine from my cheek. He looked into my eyes and I saw the question there. Was it enough? I looked at the empty stage where the Aura Tech logo still glowed bright and cold. I looked at my parents, who were staring at us with a mixture of fear and awe. I took Malik's hand. "Let us go home," I said. Malik nodded. He turned to the crowd one last time. "The show is over," he announced. "Please vacate the premises. My demolition crew arrives in 1 hour to tear this tent down." We walked out into the rain together, but this time I did not feel the cold. I felt the warmth of his hand and the burning heat of absolute total victory. As the security team dragged Brent out of the pavilion, his screams fading into the distance, the room was left in a state of stunned paralysis. The guests looked like statues frozen in the middle of a nightmare. The music had stopped. The food I had delivered was getting cold on the tables. The only sound was the heavy rhythmic drumming of the rain against the glass roof, a sound that felt like applause from the universe. Keisha was standing alone near the cake table. She looked small. Without Brent beside her, without her army of bridesmaids who had quietly retreated into the crowd, she looked like a child playing dress-up in a costume that no longer fit. Her mascara was running down her face in dark streaks, ruining the perfect aesthetic she had fought so hard to maintain. She looked at the empty doorway where her husband had just been evicted, then she looked at me. But before she could speak, before she could launch into another tirade of blame, a man in a tuxedo walked onto the floor. It was Mr. Henderson, the venue manager. He held a wireless credit card terminal in one hand and a long, itemized receipt in the other. He looked nervous. He had just watched the groom get fired and the property change ownership, but he was a businessman, and he had a bottom line to protect. "Excuse me," he said, clearing his throat, his voice trembling slightly in the silence. "I hate to interrupt, but given the sudden change in circumstances and the departure of Mr. Hawthorne, I need to settle the final balance of the bill immediately." He walked past Keisha and approached my father. "Mr. Williams, the contract states that the remaining 50% is due upon the commencement of the reception. That is $86,000, including the overages for the imported wine and the rush fees for the decor." My father Otis looked at the bill as if it were a venomous snake. His face, which had been pale gray, flushed a deep, alarming red. He patted his pockets instinctively, though we all knew his pockets were empty. "Well, surely," my father stammered, trying to summon a shred of his former arrogance. "Surely we can bill this. Send an invoice to the house. You know we are good for it." Mr. Henderson shook his head politely, but firmly. "I am afraid I cannot do that, sir. I cannot. My instructions from the new ownership group are very specific. All accounts must be settled in full today. No credit, no billing." He glanced nervously at Malik, who was standing beside me watching the scene with his arms crossed. Malik did not say a word. He simply raised an eyebrow, confirming that this was indeed his policy. My mother Linda stepped forward, clutching her pearl necklace. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "We are the Williams family. We have been members of this club for years." "Former members," Malik corrected her softly. His voice cut through her bluster like a razor. My mother flinched. She looked at the credit card terminal in the manager's hand. She looked at my father, who was staring at his shoes. She knew they did not have $86,000. They did not even have $6,000. They had spent everything on the deposit, and the dress counting on Brent's bonus to cover the rest. Desperation is a funny thing. It makes people forget their pride. It makes them forget their insults. It makes them forget who they are. Slowly, inevitably, my mother's eyes turned to me. She looked at the suit jacket Malik had draped over my shoulders. She looked at the way I was standing tall and unbroken. She remembered the black card I had used at the dress shop. She remembered the trucks I had summoned. And she remembered what Malik had just revealed on the stage about owning the company. "Sophia," she said, her voice taking on that wheedling, manipulative tone I hated so much. "Sophia, baby." I stared at her. I did not blink. "Sophia, look, this has all been a terrible misunderstanding," my mother continued, taking a tentative step toward me. Tensions were high. We all said things we did not mean. But we are family. You cannot let your father be embarrassed like this in front of the city. You cannot let them ruin your sister's wedding day over a bill. She gestured to the manager. "Just pay him, Sophia. You have the money. Malik has the money. Just write the check and we can sort this all out later. We can sit down as a family and talk. Please." My father looked up, hope lighting his eyes. "Yes, Sophia. Be the bigger person. Show them you are better than this. Help your sister." I looked at them. I looked at the two people who were supposed to protect me, who were supposed to love me unconditionally. 5 minutes ago, they were cheering while I was being thrown out. 5 minutes ago, they were nodding in agreement when I was called trash. And now they wanted my wallet. I laughed. It was not a bitter laugh. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. "Help you?" I asked. "Yes," my mother urged. "You are the oldest. It is your responsibility." I shook my head slowly, letting the absurdity of her request wash over me. Then I looked at Keisha. She was watching me, holding her breath, waiting to see if I would save her one last time. I turned back to my mother. "You want me to pay?" I asked, pretending to consider it. Yes, my mother breathed. I stepped closer to her so she could see the wine stain on my chest. The stain Keisha had put there. I would love to help you, Mom, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. But there is a problem. What problem? She asked. I pointed to the stain. You see, Keisha was right. I am dirt. My mother's face fell. And as we all know, I continued raising my voice so the whole room could hear. Dirt is poor. Dirt is filthy. Dirt does not have $86,000 to spend on a party for people who hate her. Sophia, please, my mother begged, reaching for my hand. Do not touch me, I snapped, pulling back. You made it very clear where I stand. You put me at table 45. You left me in the rain. You called me a slur in front of 300 people. And now you want my money. I turned to Mr. Henderson, the manager. I believe you have a check on file from me, I said. A deposit check for $50,000 that I gave you last week to secure the catering. Mr. Henderson nodded, tapping his screen. Yes, Mrs. Johnson, we have it right here. We were going to process it today to cover the bulk of the balance. I smiled. You might want to run that again, Mr. Henderson. He frowned, confused. He tapped a few buttons on his terminal. The machine beeped, a long, harsh error tone. His eyes went wide. It says, "Payment stopped," he stammered. "The check has been voided." A scream tore through the room. It was Keisha. You canceled the check, she shrieked, running toward me, her face twisted and ugly. You canceled it. You knew. You knew this would happen. I looked at her calmly. I canceled it yesterday, Keisha, right after I watched your fiancé cheating on you in a nightclub. I decided I was not going to pay for a wedding that was already a sham. Cheating? Keisha froze. Oh, you did not know, I asked, feigning surprise. I sent the video to Dad 2 days ago. I assumed he told you. Keisha whipped her head around to stare at our father. Otis shrank back, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Dad, she whispered. You knew. He is a powerful man, Keisha. My father stammered, repeating the excuse he had given me. I was trying to protect the investment. The investment, Keisha screamed. I am your daughter, not a stock portfolio. She collapsed onto the floor, her white dress billowing around her like a parachute of a crashed plane. She sobbed uncontrollably, realizing that her entire life had been a transaction to her parents. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Williams, the bill. If payment is not rendered immediately, I will be forced to call the police for theft of services. My mother grabbed my father's arm. Otis, do something. I have nothing, my father yelled, throwing his hands up. Nothing. Malik took the company. The accounts are frozen. We are ruined. He looked at Malik. You did this. You planned this. Malik stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. I did not plan your greed, Otis Malik said calmly. I just gave you enough rope to hang yourself, and you did it perfectly. Malik looked at me. Are you ready to go? Yes, I said. We turned to leave. Sophia. Wait, my mother cried, running after us. Where are you going? You cannot leave us here. They are going to arrest us. I stopped and looked back at her one last time. I suggest you ask Keisha for help, I said, cold as ice. She is the golden child, remember. Maybe her aesthetic can pay the bill, or maybe you can sell that dress. I heard it is worth $12,000. I paused. Oh wait, it is not. It belongs to me too, since I paid for it. But you can keep it. Consider it a parting gift. We walked out of the tent and into the rain. Behind us, the chaos was erupting. Keisha was screaming at her father. My mother was sobbing, begging the manager for time. The guests were fleeing, trying to distance themselves from the disaster. We walked to the lead escalade. The driver held the door open for me. I slid into the leather seat, which was dry and warm. Malik got in beside me. As the car pulled away, I looked out the tinted window. I saw the pavilion receding in the distance, a glowing box of misery that no longer held any power over me. I took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, my lungs felt full. The weight of their expectations, the weight of their insults, the weight of their conditional love was gone. I looked at Malik. He was watching me with pride. "How do you feel?" he asked, taking my hand. I looked at the rain streaking against the glass. "I feel clean," I said. And I meant it. The dirt was gone. All that was left was the diamond. 3 months have passed since the day the rain washed away my old life. I am sitting on the terrace of our private villa in Malibu, watching the sun begin its slow descent into the Pacific Ocean. The sky is a painting of soft purples and fiery oranges, a stark contrast to the gray gloom of that afternoon in Atlanta. Here, the air smells of salt water and jasmine, not of desperation and old money. The only sound is the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the cliffs below, a sound that soothes my soul rather than waking me up in a panic. In my lap rests a heavy cream-colored envelope bearing the seal of the Fulton County Superior Court. I did not open it with trembling hands. I opened it with the calm detachment of a stranger reading a newspaper article about a distant tragedy. It is the final update on the Williams family bankruptcy proceedings. According to the documents, my parents have officially surrendered their colonial home. The house where I was told I was not good enough, the house where I was made to feel like a servant in my own skin, is being sold at auction next Tuesday. The proceeds will go toward paying the $86,000 catering bill that they could not afford, and the legal fees associated with the lawsuit Malik filed against Brent. My father, Otis, has moved into a 2-bedroom rental apartment in a neighborhood he used to mock for being lower class. My mother has had to sell her jewelry, including the pearls she clutched so tightly when she begged me for money. As for the golden couple, their fairy tale ended before the honeymoon even began. Keisha and Brent filed for an annulment 2 weeks after the wedding fiasco. Brent is currently living in his parents' basement, buried under debt and unemployable in the corporate sector, thanks to the non-disclosure agreements and conduct violations Malik made public. Keisha is working as a hostess at a mid-range chain restaurant, trying to pay off the credit card debt she racked up pretending to be wealthy. She tried to call me once a few weeks ago. I watched the phone ring until it went to voicemail, and then I blocked the number. I did not feel guilty. I felt light. I reach for the wine glass sitting on the teak table next to me. It is filled with a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, a bottle that costs more than Keisha's entire bridal trousseau. I swirl the dark red liquid, looking at the way it catches the dying light. It reminds me of the wine Keisha threw on me. That wine was meant to stain me, to mark me as dirty, to humiliate me into submission. But this wine tastes different. I take a slow sip, letting the complex notes of dark fruit and oak settle on my tongue. It tastes like justice. It tastes like the sweetness of a life reclaimed. For 32 years, I believed that family was a life sentence. I thought that sharing blood meant sharing a burden. I believed that if I just worked harder, if I just paid enough bills, if I just made myself smaller and quieter, they would eventually love me. I thought that being the scapegoat was my destiny, that I was the dirt they walked on to keep their shoes clean. But sitting here listening to the ocean, I realized the truth. Dirt is not worthless. Dirt is where things grow. Dirt is the foundation. Without the dirt, there is no garden, there is no harvest, there is no life. They looked down on me because I was grounded while they floated away on hot air and lies. And when the storm came, they blew away and I remained. The glass door behind me slides open, and Malik steps out onto the terrace. He is barefoot, wearing linen pants and a loose white shirt. He looks relaxed, the tension of the city and the takeover left far behind us. He does not say a word at first. He just walks over to my chair and places his hand on my shoulder. His touch is warm and solid. He looks down at the court documents in my lap. "Is it over?" he asks, his voice blending with the sound of the surf. I fold the letter and place it on the table face down. "Yes," I say. "It is finished. They have faced their consequences." Malik nods. He leans down and kisses the top of my head. "Do you miss them?" he asks. I think about the question. Do I miss the anxiety? Do I miss the insults masked as jokes? Do I miss the feeling of being an ATM machine with a heartbeat? No, I answer truthfully. I mourn the family I wished I had. I mourn the parents I deserved. But I do not miss the people they actually were. I made space in my life for peace, and I'm not going to fill it with ghosts. Malik walks around to the other side of the table and picks up his own glass. He raises it toward the horizon, where the sun is now just a sliver of gold against the water. To the future, he says softly. And to the family we choose. I raise my glass and clink it against his. The sound is clear and bell-like ringing out in the quiet evening. To us, I whisper. As we drink, I look at my husband. He is my family. My assistant Marcus, who helped me hide the trucks, is my family. The friends who checked on me after the wedding are my family. Family is not defined by whose DNA you carry. Family is defined by who stands beside you when the rain starts falling. Family are the people who hand you a towel when you are wet, not the ones who throw wine on you to make you colder. I stand up and walk to the railing, looking out at the vast, endless ocean. I am Sophia. I am a CEO. I am a wife. I am a black woman who built an empire with her own two hands. And I am finally free. The sun disappears completely, leaving us in the soft twilight. The air is cool, but I am not cold. I have never been warmer. If you are watching this, and you feel like you are trapped in a role you did not audition for, if you feel like you are being used by the people who should be protecting you, please listen to me. You are not dirt. You are a diamond buried in the rough. And sometimes you have to walk away from the mine to finally shine. Do not let anyone tell you that you owe them your happiness just because you share a last name. Your worth is not a negotiation, it is a fact. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to cut ties to save your soul, let me know in the comments. You are not alone. Hit like and subscribe for more stories of truth and triumph. And remember, the best revenge is not destroying them. It is saving yourself. I turn back to Malik and we walk inside together, closing the door on the night, leaving the darkness outside where it belongs. The screen fades to black. The most profound lesson this journey taught me is that your value is never negotiable, especially not by people who benefit from your silence. For years, I believed that enduring disrespect was the price of admission for family love. I thought if I gave enough, paid enough, and shrunk myself enough, they would finally see me. But I learned that you cannot purchase respect from those committed to misunderstanding you. True family isn't about shared DNA. It's about shared values. The moment I stopped begging for a seat at their table and built my own was the moment I truly began to live. If Sophia's journey to freedom inspired you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and justice. Have you ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member to protect your peace? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the sign someone else needs to finally walk away.